Ahead on Small Town Big Deal, how one town's bridge crossed the gap of history and helped us build a more perfect union.
I think today even young people can be inspired by Mrs. Parks.
And then,
history comes alive as we learn about some special World War II fighter pilots who were fighting battles abroad and here at home.
Then find out what this camp and country singer Zac Brown have in common.
Welcome to Small Town Big Deal. I'm Rodney Miller.
And I'm Jan Carl.
And we are in Selma, Alabama on the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
Now, the original purpose was simply to help cars get back and forth across the Alabama River.
But in 1965, this bridge became a turning point in American history. There are times that the bravery of ordinary citizens is truly a big deal. And in this case, it also helped create momentous and vital change.
It was a time when African Americans were trying to secure the rights any Americans should be able to take for granted.
In many parts of the country, separate and unequal was the law of the land.
Across Alabama, manipulating rules, intimidation, and outright violence had long kept African Americans from registering to vote. In Selma, only about 2% of eligible black residents had been allowed to register.
On a chilly morning in March 1965, the community gathered at Brown Church and prepared to march to Alabama's capital city, Montgomery.
They had a simple demand: the right to vote.
I was 15, my brother 13. It was my idea. My brother says, Mom says don't march. But I'm like, we'll get to the back of the line and we'll be fine.
Back then, Diana Harris was one determined teenager.
At 15, were you not frightened?
I think I was too young to fear. I had no fear that day. I always knew that I could be arrested. My mother knew that also.
Diana was there on Sunday, March 7, 1965.
It'll be detrimental to your safety to continue this march.
A day that became known as Bloody Sunday.
Bloody Sunday was the day that the marchers were attacked. The tear gas, the beatings, and whatever else. You heard people yelling, screaming, crying. People were running back, trying to get back to the church for their safe haven.
Deputized men on horseback, called posse men, swung billy clubs, beating the marchers as they tried to run back to the church. One chased Diane and her brother.
This posseman ran us all the way to the church. The horse ran up the steps of Brown Chapel, and we both hugged each other and cried.
I remember watching that on the evening news just as a young boy, and I couldn't comprehend how someone could do that to someone else. And I still can't.
The media showed all of America what was happening in Selma. President Lyndon Johnson deployed the National Guard to protect the marchers. It was only then that they could safely begin their trek to Montgomery.
Marchers walked 54 miles in 3 days, camping out along the way. Driving along the highway today, you're following in the footsteps of people who refused to back down. They finally made it to Montgomery.
Oh, that was a day of jubilation. That day was just a beautiful sight because you saw black and whites together of all races, all church denominations. You saw rabbis, nuns, priests, you name it, they were there. They came from everywhere.
Today, people still come from everywhere to see important civil rights locations throughout Montgomery.
The Civil Rights Memorial Center commemorates people who died fighting for civil rights.
So this is actually the spot where she was arrested.
And then there's the site where Rosa Parks was arrested back in 1955, an act that marked the beginning of the modern civil rights movement.
The Rosa Parks Museum is a monument to the courage of an ordinary woman who decided she should not have to give up her seat on a bus simply because of the color of her skin. Artwork and historic images commemorates her arrest and the bus boycott that followed 381 days when African Americans instead walked miles to work or shared cars like this one rather than ride on segregated buses. You can see a bus like the one Rosa Parks was riding on the day she did her part to change the world.
It's kind of hard to imagine. The day she got on that bus, she had no idea she was about to change history.
Seeing this bus reminded Rodney and me when we once got to sit in the actual bus Rosa Parks was riding when she was arrested.
The driver said that if I refused to leave the seat, he would have to call the police, and I told him, just call the police. They placed me under arrest. The time had just come when I had been pushed as far as I could stand to be pushed, I suppose.
It was an incredible feeling to be in the bus and then listening to Rosa Parks' voice talk about the incident. I mean, she had to sit to stand up.
I know Rosa Parks has said many times about the choices we make in life determine where we go, but who would have ever thought that moment in time there when she made that choice would change the course of history?
We can relate to her because she was such just an ordinary person, but she did something extraordinary. And I think that is what we want our visitors to take away here at the Rosa Parks Museum, that even you can do a very simple act that can possibly change the world. I think today even young people can be inspired by Mrs. Parks and by her act of bravery and courage.
The bus boycott lasted for over a year, and it took a U.S. Supreme Court decision to finally force Montgomery to desegregate its buses. It would be another 10 years before the march from Selma to Montgomery and the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which said race cannot be used to keep people from voting.
Special places like the Rosa Parks Museum and the Edmund Pettus Bridge help us remember the people whose shoulders we stand on.
They serve as a bridge between the past and the present and remind us all that we have a role to play in building a more perfect union. Up next,
this is a time period where many people believed that people of color could not fly.
They battled seemingly impossible odds. Some very courageous World War II pilots who had to fight for the right to defend their country. Welcome back to Small Town Big Deal. We are in Tuskegee, Alabama.
At a place dedicated to a very special group of World War II fighter pilots who were busy fighting two battles.
Yeah, one overseas and the other right here at home. The Tuskegee Airmen were members of the very first squadron of African-American pilots in the history of the U.S. Army Air Corps. This National Historic Site at Moulton Field in Tuskegee honors them.
National Park Ranger Vester Marable is an expert on the Tuskegee Airmen and walks us through this critical piece of American history.
The Tuskegee Airmen were the bombardiers, the navigators, the pilots, but they were also the grounds crew, the cooks, the mechanics.
That included men and women working to make the program successful and helping America to victory.
But in the early 1940s, they still battled segregation and prejudice in many parts of the U.S. They had to fight for the right to fight for America.
This is a time period where many people believed that people of color could not fly.
John Lee Spencer remembers what it was like to be fighting a war on two fronts.
We were outsiders, and we was trying to break the color barrier, get into the fight, and we wanted to prove ourselves that we was good enough to be one of them. We proved that you could be whatever you wanted to be or whatever our government would let you be.
And if what you wanted to be was a military pilot, then it all started here in Tuskegee.
Where we're standing right now is actually in front of what we call the J-3 Piper Cub, and this was one of the beginning trainer planes that the Tuskegee Airmen would have used.
It's basically a stick and rudder aircraft, very basic. It gets you off the ground and lets you learn how to fly.
And while there wasn't much support for the program, in the spring of 1941, the trainees had a very famous and very important visitor. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt visits and then flies with one of the flight instructors.
She lands and utters some iconic words. Well, it looks like you can fly all right, and the rest is literally history.
History you can see and touch.
Think I can start it?
But before the Tuskegee Airmen earned their wings, they had to withstand rigorous training and tests.
This is a pretty tight space.
Yeah, so this was a link trainer, which would have been the flight simulator that the airmen would have trained in.
Teaching pilots to fly without sight, using only their instruments.
So I didn't realize that they would go into this in complete darkness.
Complete darkness. This machine actually washed out more people than a lot of people would imagine, but it would help to prepare you if you did not know if you could fly. You knew once you got out of this machine.
There were 13 candidates that originally started in July of 1941. At the end of the very rigorous program, 5 of them earned their wings.
As the pilots developed, the planes got bigger and more powerful.
Once you get to Tuskegee's Moton Field, you'd go from flying the J-3 Piper Cub up to the PT-17 Stearman. And now this is your big baby. So
That's a lot more powerful motor.
It's got a lot more. The Continental engine, and some were even made by Rolls-Royce, gives you that vroom that you would expect to hear from those planes.
What's that called? What is that?
That vroom.
Once you finish in Hangar 1, you get to Hangar 2, and you see the plane that brought them so many victories.
This is our P-51 Mustang D, and this is the Duchess Arlene.
This plane is named after the pilot's college love interest, Arlene.
But don't let the name fool you. She packs serious fighting power.
These planes were like supercharged compared to what they were flying with earlier, which would only go maybe 100 miles an hour, and these go over 400 miles an hour.
That's right.
Getting the P-51 Mustangs wasn't easy. Even in combat, the Tuskegee Airmen weren't given the best planes in the beginning. But as they achieved tremendous success, they were rewarded with better equipment.
This was a symbolic piece that showed that their accomplishments were finally being rewarded and were given a chance to really prove what they could do.
And prove themselves they did, as they flew over the skies of Europe protecting the bombers. In over 1,500 missions, the airmen shot down 112 enemy aircraft.
Even after all of their victories abroad during the war, when they got home, the Tuskegee Airmen still had a long road ahead of them.
So the double V here.
The double V stands for double victory, to be victorious against the enemies overseas, and to win the fight for civil rights and equality at home. Within their own country, they fought to defend.
Even though it was segregated, we were still Americans, and we had a land to fight for just like anybody else.
So in many ways, the Tuskegee Airmen and other African Americans fighting in our nation's military set the stage for the civil rights movement in America.
You know, these guys were kind of the catalyst. They paved the way for Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King.
The Tuskegee Airmen helped change history in America.
And it all started from this small town in Alabama. Now that's a big deal. When we come back, it's Camp for Kids of all abilities.
You see these children stepping a little more boldly, a little more confident who they are.
Welcome back to Small Town Big Deal.
We're about 35 miles south of Atlanta, near the small town of Fayetteville, Georgia.
Truth is, we're not in town at all. We're at camp.
You hear about a camp, you think a cabin in the woods. And what we're doing is way more than that.
This is Camp Southern Ground, the brainchild of country music superstar Zac Brown.
That's right, Zac Brown, the Zac Brown from the Zac Brown Band.
Camp Southern Ground is a lifelong dream of mine. I was a product of camp. That was very transformative for me as a kid, seeing other kids playing guitar and realizing that I could do that myself.
And in a way, that's just what makes this camp special. It's a place where kids, any kids, can realize their full potential.
Is that scaring you? Because I want you to know you can do it, just one step at a time.
Camp Southern Ground is all-inclusive for kids of all abilities.
Being a camp of diversity and having underserved youth, mainstream kids, and then kids that have developmental disorders, and you put them all together, and they have to accomplish things together, they have to rely on each other.
It's bringing in typically developing kids and letting them meet someone who's maybe a little different than them and understand that different doesn't mean better or worse, it just means different.
Good job, Levi! Nice job, Levi!
Camp Southern Ground has all the things you'd expect: archery, bike riding, and a campfire.
But it also has this awesome ropes course that's specially designed for kids of all abilities.
You see these children making discoveries within themselves, even children with autism stepping a little more boldly and a little more confident who they are.
Did you see what they call the ropes course? They call it the confidence course. It's all about being willing to try something you're not comfortable with.
Do you think you can make it up to the 6th step?
Yeah.
Do you think you could make it to the top?
Folks at the camp told us that only 6% of kids choose to play outside every day. Hey, I think kids today are missing out.
They need an opportunity to get away from their phones and the screens and find new adventures and get in touch with nature.
It's great to see the kids try new vegetables. A lot of them, this is their first time in a garden, trying things fresh from the vine and how they can incorporate that into their diets back home. So today we did a nice fresh salsa. They got to learn how to chop different vegetables, how to combine it all, and put it all together.
That looks so good. Picking fresh vegetables right out of the garden, then making salsa out of it, that's a skill that will last a lifetime.
Do you think you make it home?
Yeah.
I'm gonna make it home.
Really?
Yeah.
First thing, go home, invite all your friends over, salsa party?
The 3 goals of Camp Southern Ground are to grow unique gifts, grow healthy bodies, and to grow strong communities. And so we try to foster different values and different life lessons that these kids will be able to take home and keep those things growing with them.
This has got to be one of the coolest summer camps. But what about the rest of the year?
Soon the camp will open up for special programs to help veterans transition back into everyday life.
They'll run through a lot of recreational therapy, but also a lot of intentional content that's plugged in to help them understand who they are, who their gifts are. How do you translate what you did when you were serving abroad?
Camp Southern Ground is huge, over 400 acres. There's no way they could operate all this without corporate support from partners like Bad Boy Mowers.
So I'm sitting at my kid's ball game one day. The phone rings. On the other end, to my surprise, is Zach Brown from the Zach Brown Band. He's got my number from Willie Nelson. He hears we build the baddest mower on the planet. He's starting a new project, a new camp, and he would love for us to get involved with him. How cool is that?
Bad Boy Mowers is the perfect sponsor for this camp. This place has lots and lots and lots of grass, so Bad Boy donates brand new commercial grade mowers every year.
Zach has a tremendous passion for kids with special needs and military veterans. He shows us the plans for this brand new camp that he's wanting to create, asked if Bad Boy would love to be part of it, and of course we jumped at the opportunity.
That jump in and help out attitude is just one of the many reasons why we're so proud to be partners with Bad Boy Mowers.
Not only did Zach found the camp, but he really supports it. $2 from every ticket he sells to one of his concerts comes right back to the camp to support it.
And what we find is that while the kids with special needs get to go to a regular camp, the mainstream kids, I think, benefit even more. And they're learning that they have gifts, they've got value. And to see them coming alongside and supporting one another, I mean, I get choked up even talking about it, you know? It's really a beautiful thing.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Small Town Big Deal.
You know, it's always so inspiring to meet someone with so much talent and such a big heart like Zach Brown.
Yeah, and we're proud of our partners, Bad Boy Mowers, for helping Zach.
That camp is going to positively impact so many people for so many years to come.
And we're reminded in this episode of people who did the right thing, no matter the consequences.
It was a lot more than just a big deal. They literally helped put this country on a path to true equality.
People like Rosa Parks and the people who walked from Selma to Montgomery and the Tuskegee Airmen. I'm Rodney Miller.
And I'm Jan Carl.
Join us again next week when once again we celebrate the great stories from across America.
Back in the 60s, there were very few people in Selma, Black African Americans, that were registered to vote. Our goal was simply to make sure that our parents got the right to vote. And we were marching because many of our parents would have lost their jobs had they been caught in a line trying to march.